each time, and I want to tell you about this hat. This is called a Tilly, and this is the first hat that I've ever had that comes with an owner's manual, for Pete's sake, if you can believe that. And I suppose we've all bought things where they said there was a lifetime guarantee, and we all sort of joked about that. About after I had my first Tilly hat, about 20 years later, it was beginning to wear a little bit. So I thought I was going to put this lifetime guarantee to a test. And so I got on their website, and immediately they sent me a thing so that I sent the hat back. I didn't have to send my worn out hat back, and they replaced it. So there is some hope for lifetime guarantees. So if you want a hat that you can wear forever, Tilly is a good one to have. I also need to tell you, I think I'm slowly losing my sanity, and I want to tell you the most recent evidence of that. I was getting ready for night, and I thought maybe I ought to shave, so I shaved, and then I started putting on deodorant, and I thought, why in the world would I do that? Unless you have smell-o-vision, me wearing deodorant really doesn't matter, does it? Tonight, it's going to be a fun night, I think. Dr. Mike Harrison, there are lots of wonderful teachers in Bear Valley Unified, and I chose Mike for a couple of reasons. Number one, he has, I'm sure many of you have interesting stories, but he has a particularly interesting story. And also, Mike is getting ready to retire. His retirement has proved to be kind of interesting. And I was afraid in retirement, he'd go off and sit on the top of some mountain and play his guitar, and we'd never be able to find him. So I thought it was important that we capture him before he escapes and goes off into the hinterlands or whatever he's going to do in his retirement.
Hinterlands, yeah.
So welcome to all of you. Just a reminder, we're going to talk for a bit about Mike's past, and then we'll open this up and you'll be welcome to ask some questions. When we get to that point, I'll tell you what we're going to do. So Mike, let's go back and start. You were born and raised, at least initially. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Well, I was born, in fact, yes. First of all, I want to thank Tori and Phil and the others that are involved in this for lowering their standards and being desperate enough to ask me to do this. So I appreciate that. And it's fun to see this variety of people. It's fantastic. Yeah, I was born in Ridgecrest, and when I left Ridgecrest, nobody really knew where that was. But people in Big Bear seem to be aware of where Ridgecrest is.
Why were you in Ridgecrest, Mike?
My father was the head of the personnel department on the Navy base that's out in the middle of the desert. Great place for a Navy base. But that's where I was born. All my brothers were born there. And it was an interesting place only because there were a lot of very bright people, you know, chemists and physicists and people that had PhDs and worked on the base, essentially designing weapons, you know, and so the Sidewinder missile is their claim to fame. They developed the Sidewinder missile there. And so I grew up, I have 5 brothers. It was a very interesting household with 5 boys. I have 2 younger brothers. One passed away probably 30 years ago, and twin brothers who are a year older than I am, and then another brother who's 9 years older. And
so you were in Ridgecrest, and then you ended up in the Philippines. Talk to us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah. Well, my dad worked for civil service. He was not in the Navy, but he worked for civil service for 30-something years. And during the Vietnam War, there was a bit of a disagreement about wages for the Filipinos at Subic Bay Naval Base, which was a very large Navy base. It's now closed. And so my dad was essentially there to appease the Filipinos and keep order there. And so we lived there from 68 to 70, I think it was.
So you left Ridgecrest, you were how old?
I was in 6th grade.
And you went to the Philippines for how long?
Until I was at the beginning of, at the end of 8th grade, essentially. So yeah, not quite 3 years.
And
yeah.
So now you come back to where to start your high school experience?
Back to Ridgecrest. So one thing about the Philippines is that I think it was fundamental in forming my view of the world in that when we left Clark Air Base to drive to Subic Bay, the abject poverty that is there and continues really affected my little 6th grade mind. And I realized that, you know, in the United States, we don't see that kind of poverty, although, you know, of course, there's plenty of poverty here as well, but not that bad. And that was really important in shaping kind of my view of the world and the United States.
You went, did you go to what would be the equivalent of a public school in the Philippines?
Yeah, I was at military school.
So you were with
a lot of single teachers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you come back to Ridgecrest and tell us about that part of your life.
Well, it was very interesting because at George Dewey Junior Senior High School, it was very strict, as you can imagine. We had strict dress code, and in the 60s, you know, they had a special haircut that we had to have. We had to wear dress shirts, dark pants, and shinable shoes. And when we came back, I went to an experimental school where I could choose what I wanted to do. And, you know, I could go to this class today if I felt like it, or I could go to that class. And I chose not to go to a lot of classes most of the time. And so that kind of ended my academic career pretty drastically.
Did you end up graduating from high school at Ridgecrest?
This was the middle school that I went to in the last few months of 8th grade. Then I went to Burroughs High School in Ridgecrest, and had a lot of fun. I crawled out of high school barely, thanks to my girlfriend, who helped me to do my homework. And you know, I graduated. I think my grade point average was just over 1. And I really was distracted in high school, but it was the 70s. You know, I was distracted. So
were you involved in sports or in music or anything in high school?
I was involved in sports. I played football and basketball, and I ran cross country. And I really believed that because I was, you know, 8 feet tall when I was born, I was always taller than everybody else. I really believed that I was going to play in the NBA, you know, big fish in a small town. And, you know, obviously that didn't happen yet, still hopeful. But I was just really involved in basketball. That's all I ever did. And
so, you barely have a high school diploma.
Right. Yeah.
You think you're a future NBA star.
Right, exactly.
And
still waiting.
What happens?
Well, my basketball coach actually got me a job at Safeway, and it was like $1.10 an hour. I mean, I was just living large. And so I thought I would just stay there. And my girlfriend's dad was a Lutheran pastor, and I just saw Amber Parle. Oh my gosh, all these people, wow. Anyway, sorry. So cool. He said, you know, no, you're not going to just live here in Ridgecrest and work at Safeway. You're going to college. And, you know, and he took care of getting everything done for me to go to college. And the only thing I cared about really was playing basketball there. And their basketball coach called me and said, you know, blah, 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 blah. And so I went to play basketball.
You went where? Where did you
Lutheran, go? California Lutheran in Thousand Oaks.
Tori, let's show some pictures of Mike in his college days. Can we do that?
Yeah, that'll be fun. Probably haven't changed that much.
Great.
Oh, Lord. And I mean that.
So you can guess which one is Mike on the left if you'd like, and then we'll tell you. So as you can see, he looks a bit different today than he did then, but maybe not a whole lot different.
Yeah, my suit is different.
Okay, Tori, that's great. Everybody decided which one is Mike in the blue suit group?
Wow.
Mike was on the left, by the way.
Yeah, that was me on the left. That was my friend Wes, who lives in Colorado. We had this scheme that there was a formal dance, and we thought we would approach the tuxedo company and say, hey, we'll advertise if you give us free tuxedos. And so we wore these tuxedos to the dining hall and stood outside, and we didn't, they didn't get one single sale. So we didn't go to the formal.
So another failed business venture.
Yeah, another failed business adventure, yeah, yeah.
So you're at Cal Lu for a year, and your basketball career didn't seem to be flourishing.
Not the way I expected.
So what happens?
Well, when we played teams like Caltech and some of these schools that are not real sports powerhouses, they allowed me into the game. And I remember the first game I ever was in college, I traveled. I had an open layup on a fast break, and I traveled. And that was sort of marked my entire career. So after that, I actually got introduced to books. And I had a very good English professor who I didn't know that books had ideas in them up until that point, and I was just amazed, like, wow, you read this stuff and things happen. So that was that triggered my sort of intellectual capacity, and from there, I thought I was going to teach special education. That was my goal. In high school, I was involved with the Special Olympics, and so I would drive. This seems weird today, but I would drive kids to all these events, the special ed kids. And so my goal was to teach special ed. And I was working in a classroom in Newbury Park, and the teacher said, you don't really want to go into special ed. It's changing. There's a lot of paperwork. Now that's 1976. And as Sharon, I think I saw Sharon is in, Sharon's not special. Anyway, there's a lot more.
Hi.
Oh, okay. And so I also got really interested in religion. My girlfriend's father was a pastor, and I started to take more classes in theology and philosophy. I took a really great Kierkegaard class. And so by the end of college, I had decided I wanted to become a Lutheran pastor. And so I graduated with a liberal arts degree, and that was in 79. And I went to Lutheran Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. And as you can tell from the pictures, I don't look like your typical Lutheran pastor. And when I went to Minnesota, I didn't really fit too well. And after about 2.5 years, I realized that I was doing this not so much for myself, but really to please Kari Johnson's father. Like, wouldn't he be happy if I did that? And so I left there.
So you were there 3 years, and for whatever reason decided this wasn't for you.
Yeah. And I was married, and I had my son Soren, who is an incredible young man who's, I think, on here right now. And Soren and I actually, when I left the seminary, we didn't move immediately. His mom was working, and she was a professional, and so we were financially okay. And Soren and I got to spend 6 months hanging out all day long, and we had a great time in Minnesota. He probably doesn't remember the blizzard that we tried to get home in. And walking on 3rd Avenue, and the bus that I had waited like 45 minutes for drove right past us. So we ended up walking home in a giant blizzard. But at any rate, so we moved back to California. I worked in construction, which is, again, not my forte. And that was quite an adventure in itself. And I got a call from a principal of a Lutheran high school, and they needed a PE teacher. And I thought, well, I could teach PE, I think. And so I taught PE, and I enjoyed being around the kids. And then they asked me to teach typing. And for the younger folks that are on here, typing there were these machines that you would hit these keys, similar to the keyboards we have today. And so I taught typing, and then I taught a couple of religion classes, a New Testament class, Old Testament class. And then I taught English, and I really, really enjoyed that. And the school I could see was a sinking ship. It was a private school, and it wasn't going well. So I left there and went and got a teaching credential. Excuse me.
And then you came into the public school system,
That
if I
is
remember
correct.
correctly.
And I taught at Granada Hills High School for 5 years. And I was there during the Northridge earthquake. That was a great time. And then, let's see.
So you taught there for 5 years.
I taught there for 5 years. I was not married to Soren's mother anymore. I was married to another woman, and we had Simone, and some people are clapping. In 1992, the riots in LA happened related to Rodney King. And my wife at the time was working in South Central LA, which was fine, but after the riots, things changed quite a bit. And a friend of ours who lived in Running Springs mentioned that they were looking for an English teacher and a basketball coach in Big Bear. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. And so I applied, and I went up for an interview, and I met this very strange gnome-like person who wore this incredible hat, as I recall. Anyway, I caught him in a moment of weakness, and he decided to hire me, and that was when it started in 1992.
I'll tell you, and Mike, maybe we'll talk a little about this. You know, you can imagine basketball coach, and you know, there was a lot of interest in this. And, you know, as a principal, you kind of sort through and try to figure out what criteria you use. And the thing that caught my eye was a program that was kind of interesting and special that Mike was involved in. Why don't you talk a minute about that program?
Yeah, it was a really great program. It's called Humanitas, and it's still in existence in LA Unified. Granada Hills was part of LA Unified. Essentially, you have 4 or 5 subjects, and the teachers all plan together, and the students all stay together and move from teacher to teacher. Excuse me. And you plan the assessments, all the tests together, so they had to combine all these different subjects into their assessment. The other good thing about it was that the professional development, we would go to other schools who had Humanitas programs, and they would help us write these assessments and basically judge us. And I learned so much from these veteran teachers. I wasn't exactly a rookie, but it was a very, very foundational experience for me and my teaching. And then when I came to Big Bear, I didn't know that, Phil, that was why you were interested, but we tried it for 2 years, and it was good. But in a small school, it's very difficult to schedule that many kids in a very tight schedule. So it kind of went by the wayside.
Why don't you tell them what it looked like at Big Bear High School?
Well, I have to jog my memory. We had Kathy Niederkorn and Linda Ricciuti, who are still both in town, I believe, and me. And so Linda taught art, I believe, at the time. She was an English teacher, but she taught the art segment, and Kathy Niederkorn taught history.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we at that time, we took kids off the hill to museums and concerts and that sort of thing as part of that program. And it was really, I thought, spectacular.
Yeah.
But again, it was too problematic schedule.
So here you are, you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
You have a fairly secure job at Big Bear High School. We lowered our standards and let you slip in.
I was always on the edge.
Now, what would possibly motivate you at this point in your life to go back to school to get a doctorate degree, for God's sake?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's almost embarrassing to say this, but I really like learning. You know, it wasn't like I was going to go become a young rookie at a college somewhere. I didn't do student teaching. I taught at the Lutheran school, and then at Cal Lutheran, they didn't require me to do student teaching. And that always was in the back of my mind, like I really didn't know what I was doing. And so I always wanted to improve myself as a teacher. And so what better way to do that? And one person who was really instrumental in me going was Lisa Weiner, Tori's mom. And, you know, she would hand me articles and a book here and there, and I would read this stuff and go, wow, you know, this is me. This is what I want to do. And so I was at a perfect time in my life. I was single again and didn't have a whole lot going on. So I'd sworn off women folk and decided to just jump in. And it was a really great experience. I learned a ton about myself. When you do a PhD, you're on your own road. You know, you can't lean on anybody. It was very nice to have Lisa go in 2 years before me and inform me of what could happen. So that was great.
I thought maybe your motivation was to hustle young co-eds. That wasn't on your list.
That would have been your motivation, Phil, but but at that time, as I said, I wasn't very good at relationships, so I didn't know. Anyway, I had a fantastic advisor too. That really colors the experience, and we're still in touch. We went up and visited her last summer, I think it was.
This took how long, Mike?
Say it again.
How long did it take you to finish your doctorate?
Normally it takes 6 years. It took me 15. No, I think, what was it, 2010, so it took me 6 years to do it.
And how much money?
You really want to know?
Yeah, the rest of these people do.
Yeah, I was expecting to get fellowships and that kind of thing, and I didn't know this till later, which they told me it's based on need. Well, I am an older person with substantial income from teaching. I wasn't like the young pups that were there. So I paid it down, but I currently owe $90,000. So it's my second highest payment next to my mortgage. Yeah.
Mike, yeah, you got interested in the course of this project in writing. And would you talk a little bit about your dissertation and what you learned about this whole writing business, please?
I could read the whole thing to you. It's only a couple hundred pages.
I think we'll pass.
Yeah. So my focus was on how teachers viewed or valued writing in general, and then how they viewed and valued writing instruction. And when I say teachers, I'm not just talking about English teachers. And it's interesting to think about, you know, we all have this impulse to communicate since the, you know, cave people, since we were dragging our knuckles on the ground. But if you talk to people today, there's a lot of anxiety around writing, you know, for all of us, you know, and I attribute it to the red pen, because when you write something, it's judged. And I've done a lot of judging over the course of my career, but, you know, teachers are nervous about their own writing, which can color their views on writing instruction. And surprisingly, even English teachers, they don't receive a lot of instruction on how to teach writing. And so with the Common Core coming in, a lot of history and math teachers were expected to incorporate more writing in their class. And that was kind of a frightening thing for a lot of people. And so that's what my study was. What were their values? What were their attitudes toward writing, and the Common Core itself? So,
what did you learn, Mike?
I think probably the most important thing I learned was that it's instrumental to people feeling comfortable with writing if you introduce them to personal writing and use personal writing as a vehicle to academic writing. I started doing this assignment called open writing, where you could write whatever you wanted to write, as long as it didn't get me fired. And I was close a couple times. And then they had an audience. They read what they wrote to a group that they chose, and then one person from that group would read to the class. And I started writing a book about this whole experience, because the ripple effects of that one little assignment each week were astounding in terms of building class culture, in terms of, I got an email today, in fact, a student saying how much she missed the open writing assignment. And I had her 2 years ago. when you build up this disposition to write, where writing is more comfortable and there's positive experience with it, when you go to academic writing, which can be really fearful, it's a little bit easier.
Interesting.
So that's probably the key thing that I got out of that.
I was telling Mike, I was in that half of the class that made the upper half successful when I was in high school, but people just said, write a paper. I don't ever recall anybody explaining to me, and that may have been my fault. I'd be the first one to admit that. And so it was really interesting to me to listen to Mike talk about this whole business about writing. Mike, music has kind of wandered through your life from the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about that? Mike he won't ever admit it, but he's a pretty darn good guitar player. And talk a little bit about how that happened, Mike, would you please?
Yeah, sure. Well, back to my high school girlfriend, she showed me some chords. Actually, it really did start, like for a lot of people my age, when the Beatles were on TV. And I saw that and I thought, wow, that looks like fun. And I asked my parents for a guitar, and they had a bunch of kids and they didn't have, they could have bought me a better guitar, what I'm saying. They bought me this plastic guitar from Sears, and I played the crap out of that thing. The problem was I played the same thing over and over and over. I remember I learned the riff for Satisfaction, or I Got No Satisfaction from the Stones. And I was playing the heck out of that. My dad finally just couldn't take it anymore and told me I couldn't play. So anyway, I learned some chords in high school, and I continued in college, just playing, open chords, and never stopped. And then, I always tried to learn things and improve. And Steve Shower, we had always talked about playing together, and finally we did. And we started playing once a week. And Steve had this very subversive way of getting people to do things, much like Phil, getting people to do things they're not really comfortable doing. And he got me to start singing. And I thought, oh gosh, this is not a public service at all. It's, me singing. Anyway, as we all know, Steve passed away, and kind of just to honor him, Colin, his son, and Ken Nettlebeck, the great, as we all know, the great keyboard player and singer, got together and we started playing once a week. And then they hired two young pups, Scott Kalarick in the math department, who's a drummer. And he played in a touring band, and he really knows what he's doing. And then they hired old Derek Hoke, who's like this amazing musician, plays multiple instruments and sings opera. And so we started putting our heads together, and we started playing. And, then they named the band Dr. Harrison in the credentials. And we've been playing a lot. I really miss it right now in particular. It's just awful we can't play together.
So on your list in retirement, you're not going on the road and playing in smoke-filled bars and...
Oh, no, that's the plan. That's the plan. Yeah. No, it's just fun. It really is just fun. And it's not a business.
Mike told me don't ever call him first thing in the morning because that's his guitar practice time. Did you ever take lessons, Mike?
No. But now, there's so much. I mean, I found these CDs I bought in the 90s with these lessons on it. So I never took lessons from a guy.
Interesting.
One interesting thing is all my kids play,
ahead,
they all play all the same songs that I play. Every one of them.
We also need to mention your acting debut. Would you talk about that for a moment?
Again, not a public service. Yeah, I'm not really sure why I agreed to do that, but I had a ton of fun doing that. Brian Adams, our drama director, asked me if I would do it, and I said no. And he said, well, Colin's doing it. And I said, okay, if Colin's doing it. And it was a small role, so it was a really, I have so much more respect for actors now. I mean, it's not just learning lines and saying them, there's a lot to it. And so it was really fun.
Cool.
I won't torture people with that again, probably.
Well, I think we've had a good time talking about this. I think there's a lot of people that may have some questions for you. How this works, people, Tori's watching carefully and has her finger on the unmute button. So if you'd like to make a comment or ask Mike a question, now's the time.
Oh boy, I see some old faces. It's great. Not old faces.
Wave at us. Wave at Tori. Anybody out there? Mike and I are going to bore you some more if you don't have some questions.
I can't see everybody.
Amber, I see you waving your hand.
Me, Amber?
You just said
No, I wasn't waving my hand. Maybe it was the other Amber.
Hi, Amber.
Hi.
Amber, what time is it in New Zealand and what day is it?
It is. Oh my gosh, I've lost track of the days. I think it's Wednesday. Is it Tuesday there?
It is.
Okay, so yeah, we're on Wednesday, and it is just a little past 1 o'clock.
In the afternoon.
Yep.
Amber,
Which is why my video was muted in the beginning, because I was eating lunch, so I didn't want to, disturb
Amber,
everyone
do
with
you have a
my lunch.
question or a thought about Dr. Harrison?
No, I didn't wave my hand.
All right, we'll mute you
But-
then.
Yeah,
right.
that's fine.
Anybody else?
All right, good
Nope.
night.
there's a
Well,
question.
Tori can see.
All right, Mr. Harrison, I have a question for you.
All right, Tori.
Okay, so you talked a lot about just how guitar has kind of always been this part of your life. Do you have a favorite song or like a piece of music that you just really resonate with?
Yeah, probably. In fact, I played it today. It's Stevie Ray Vaughan's Lenny. It's an instrumental song. It's a beautiful song. And I think that I learned that when Simone was a baby. And now Soren plays it, and Chloe plays it better than all of us. But that one is really special. I don't know why. I think because I associate it with them being little pups. So yeah, Lenny, look it up.
I will.
It's a good
Also, Bonette, she has a question for you. She said,
Bonette.
"Hi, Mike. Great to learn more about you. What's your favorite venue to play at?"
Well, the Staples Center. I'm still waiting for that call. You know what? I mean, we had so much fun when we played at the Cave because, it seems like a real venue, and then also the other room, Steve and Michelle's place. I love that place. It's so homey, and it's Big Bear, and we just have fun playing there. So, but the Cave was really fun. Yeah.
Tori, Elena has a question or a thought.
Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself, Elena.
Did you unmute her?
We're working on it.
Can they unmute themselves?
No, we don't.
Okay, there you go.
So you've kind of joked around about playing in the smoky bars after you retire, but seriously, what are some of your retirement goals or plans?
Well, enlightenment. I want to be enlightened. One of the things that, you know this, Elena, as a teacher, your whole focus is on others,
Right.
going out. And I'm looking forward to reading literature that is just for me. I don't have to worry about how to develop a discussion on it.
Exactly. How to present it or create lessons or, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And of course the guitar is important to me, and being fit. I have this agreement with Heidi Carrillo, who's a teacher friend of mine.
Yeah, I think I know that girl.
I have to live to 112, and this is going to be quite a challenge. At first I thought I had a business that with some other people from UCR, and I realized my heart wasn't in that at all. It was a consulting business, and we had great material and stuff, but I don't know. I just want to just hang for a while at least. Yeah. And really just explore my mind a little bit. Yeah. So.
Cool.
That could be exciting and scary.
Yeah, especially with this one. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great.
Tori, I see. Charlotte, are you there?
Yeah, sure.
So that's one. And Soren just says that he has a question. So Soren, I can unmute you. There you go.
Soren.
Oh, one moment.
Question I have, Dad, is which one of us is your favorite? I'd really like to know. I think it would help me.
Tori, how many people are on this right now? Are there?
There are 29.
Is there anybody with the name Chloe or Simona? Let me just say,
They're not.
Soren,
They're not
you
here,
are my
Dad.
favorite.
They're not here.
You are, son. You always have been.
I knew it. I knew it. Thanks, Dad. I love you.
I love you too, Soren. Oh, boy.
That's awesome.
I was
Tori,
going to tell Simone, Amber, don't do it. Charlotte wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Haven't seen her in years.
you see her, Tori?
Yeah. Go
There
for
she
it.
is.
There we go. Hi guys. How are you? First of all, it's been a long time, but I just wanted to ask, when my year, I think it was my junior year, was the first year that we started making the book of all the open writings. Do you still do that with your kids?
No, you know what? That was the only year. There's Lisa. That was the only year because it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
The parent group supplied some of that money, and then I did. And then I was going to school, and I couldn't kick in.
Yeah.
Like $200 for that, for my part. So that was the only year, but I still read stories from that to students today, and they love them.
Yeah, I still have mine with me in Flagstaff, and so
Oh, you
I'll. Gavin, I think Gav's on here too, but we'll get bored and we'll just
Oh.
open it up sometimes. So.
Spencers are still creepy.
Oh, I know. Well, thank you.
Oh, sure. It's good to see
Ron,
you.
did you have a question or a thought? Tori, can you go back to the PVs?
Yes. Let me find you here. Go for it.
Yes, I have 2 comments
Hi,
and
Ron.
1 question.
All
Hey,
right.
first of all, just to thank you for your years of dedicated service to and for our young people. You have been a tremendous positive factor in our school system, and you've earned the opportunity to retire and so on. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that very much.
Second thing, I assume that Phil put this on knowing that you're retiring and that you're not going to have incoming students observing this past history. That could have been a very,
Delicate.
who knows where that could have gone.
I left out some of the salient points in that.
But then I do have one question. You failed to answer Phil's question. You know, the great background, very interesting, but Phil asked how old you were when you were in the 6th grade. Because back in that day, teenagers, some teenagers were still in the 6th grade. So
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And given my record, I was, 18. I actually, when I was in 6th grade, it was terrible because I was so tall. I was 6 feet in the 6th grade. My joints hurt like crazy, and I couldn't walk. I was awful. But I had a friend who was 6'4", and he ended up being 6'8" or 6'9". But yeah, 6th grade was not a fun year for me because I was so tall.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah,
Tori,
thank
I
you.
see a lot of chat. Is there some questions? Have people submitted some questions on chat?
Let's see. Well, Susie Carpenter wanted to ask what you're doing these days.
I mean, in our quarantine.
Well, I'm going to unmute Susie and she can ask
Oh,
herself.
well, I'll tell you hi, Susie.
Hi. I had 3 questions. I love Simone and Chloe so much. So I'd love to know where they are in life and what they're doing. Yeah, and what are you doing? Are you writing music or anything while you're in quarantine?
Yeah, well, I am playing a lot of music, and I'm also brushing up on my Espanol. I've hired a tutor, and she's wonderful. She's very good. Uh, so, yeah, I've been playing a lot of music, and so Simone has had this. She asked me if there was a family curse because she lived up in Northern California, and they had a fire. And so they moved from where they were to Chico, and then the Paradise Fire. Her boyfriend was in Paradise working in construction on the day of the fire. And so what happened in Chico, all the rents went up. They couldn't afford to live there anymore. So they moved to Crestline, and they had 6 days without electricity in Crestline. And so they're like, we're done with California. And they just moved to Austin, Texas.
Ooh, hook 'em horns.
Yeah.
That's my school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so that weekend, Simone really, did her Simone thing. And so she had a job lined up, several jobs lined up, and she got a job at a law firm. And that was the weekend that all the coronavirus stuff exploded. And so they said she was supposed to start on Monday, and they called her on that Friday and said, sorry, we have to put it on hold. But anyway, she's landed on her feet. She got 2 other jobs, working online and working in a food bank. And so she's scratching her way right now, but I think that it would be okay. Chloe.
At some point, I hope you get to go see her because Austin is a very magical place.
Oh, I know.
Very
I
creative.
love it. I love Austin. I've been there a few times.
Oh, okay.
Chloe was working in the entertainment industry, doing lighting and set design and that sort of thing. And she had 3 months of work lined up. And in one day, she lost all of that work. And actually, it was postponed until May. And then just the other day, she found out that they've lost that work. So she's reading a lot, and she goes online to find like data entry jobs and things like that. She still hasn't found a job, but she'll be fine.
I think that reminds me when Amber was at Concordia. Was she doing something at Concordia?
Yeah.
She actually worked a show that Amber was in. Talk
Oh,
about our world.
yeah,
that
she
was kind
did.
of
Yeah,
cool.
because that was her whole life. She got a degree in theater arts, and she does the technical side of things.
Nice.
Yeah, and so she's doing real well. Soren is a complete flop. Is he on here still? Soren's gone? Okay. Now, Soren lives in Albuquerque. He married into 4 kids. He's got a child of his own, so there are 5 grandkids. That's what I'm actually doing, is I'm monitoring their education, so I talk to them every day. And boy, I don't know how elementary school teachers do it, but there's a kindergartner, a 1st grader, a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, and a junior high kid. And that kindergartner, wow. It's a challenge. It is a challenge. But at any rate, I spend about 3 hours a day with my grandkids via FaceTime.
Corey, any other questions out there that you see?
I think that is it.
All right.
Oh, Brian's waving, jumping up and down. Brian, last one.
Tim on the chat.
Oh, I tried to unmute you, Brian. If
Here we
you
go. I got it. So, Mike, you talked about the time you were able to spend with Soren when he was a little kid, and you guys had that 6 months. How about each one of the girls? What's like one of your favorite memories with them as a child?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Yeah. Simone and I were at SeaWorld, and they have this really big, like jungle gym type of thing with water and, and it was a crowded day, and she disappeared. I don't know where she went, but yeah. And I had to go to the security folks, and they ended up finding her. I don't know why that jumped into my mind. But yeah, so Simone was such a delightful child. She was very solicitous and loving. And then 12 years old happened, and I don't know what happened with her. She was a pistol. And then I was just thinking about this the other day. Somewhere along the lines, right around 24, 25, she recaptured that just beautiful, spirited Simone that we really loved. And it's so good. And she's really struggled just with circumstances out of her control, but she's done it with a smile on her face. So that's been really good. Chloe was sort of the opposite. As a young child, she was the most stubborn person on the planet. And then when she became a teenager, she was just delightful. Favorite memory of Chloe? Well, it's a good memory, but when she was very young, she would ask me to show her things on the guitar, and I would show her one time, and she would play it immediately. And she still does this. It's really not fair. She is a very good guitar player, but you wouldn't know it. She never advertises it, but she can learn something instantly, and I wish I could do that. So,
Mike, thank you for sharing with us your story. It's been fun. I hope you've enjoyed it.
yeah.
As you probably know, we're here each Tuesday at 5:30. Next Tuesday, Dr. Mary Suzuki will be our guest, and we're going to have Mary kind of tell her story. And then hopefully by that time, she'll have a little bit of an idea of how this school year might end, and also some tentative thoughts on what next school year might look like. So next Tuesday, 5:30, Dr. Mary Suzuki. The following Tuesday, Mark Stamer, who is the Mountaintop District Ranger, will be our guest, and he has an interesting story to tell. And we're here every Tuesday at 5:30. It's called Let Me Introduce You. Hope to see lots of you next Tuesday. Thanks for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Good night.
Hey, good to see all of you people. I wish I could just say hi to every one of you individually. Have a great night. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Tori.
Bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Fabulous.
Bye.